The camera didn't just capture him, it worshipped him. In the golden frame of the 1,960 seconds, when style was rebellion and beauty was power, Terence Stamp emerged as the still point in a spinning world. That face carved like a secret, those eyes cold light over restless hearts. He became the man who defined an age without ever seeming to belong to it. In The Collector, he played a captor obsessed with beauty, and the world became his captive. By Superman 2, he was no longer just a performer. He was an idea, untouchable, divine. And then, suddenly, he was gone. No scandal, no collapse, just silence. For years, his absence echoed louder than any role he'd ever played. Some said heartbreak, others said enlightenment. But the truth was quieter and more human, a man who traded fame's noise for the sound of his own soul. What happens when the most beautiful man in cinema walks away from the mirror? London in the mid-60s wasn't just alive, it was glowing. Music pulsed from every cafe, art spilled into the streets, and a new generation was rewriting the rules of beauty. In that storm of creation and chaos, Terence Stamp stood perfectly still, the face of quiet intensity in a world addicted to noise. He didn't chase fame. It found him, wrapped around him like a tailored suit. Born in Stepney, East London, the son of a tugboat stoker, he rose from the working-class fog into the dazzling light of cinema. His performance in Billy Budd made critics search for words they'd never needed before: pure, haunting, impossible to imitate. And then The Collector turned that stillness into myth. He wasn't acting, he was existing, half angel, half stranger. Hollywood called, Fellini admired, and audiences couldn't look away. Yet behind the cool exterior, something fragile began to move, a sense that all this perfection came at a price. Because the higher the light, the longer the shadow beneath it. And in that shadow, Terence Stamp began to listen to something fame could never amplify: the quiet ache of being seen, but never understood. Before the cameras, before the tailored suits and magazine covers, there was Stepney, a gray patch of post-war London, all smoke, river fog, and small windows looking out to bigger dreams. Terence Henry Stamp was born there in 1938, in a home where hope felt like a luxury. His father worked the docks, his mother raised faith out of scarcity, and young Terence learned early that beauty can exist even in grime if you know where to look. He wasn't the loud one, nor the charming one. He was the observer, the boy who stood still long enough to see what others missed. Films were his escape light, flickering against darkness, men becoming myth. When he watched Gary Cooper for the first time, something shifted. He didn't just want to act, he wanted to belong in that stillness. After military service, he chased that calling through the Webber Douglas Academy. He was broke, shy, but magnetic. Casting directors whispered his name long before his face appeared on screen. Then came Billy Budd, the film that turned him from a dreamer into a revelation. He wasn't simply handsome, he was otherworldly, calm where others strained. That performance earned him an Oscar nomination. But more than that, it gave cinema a new kind of masculinity: quiet, contemplative, dangerous. From London's industrial outskirts to Cannes' blinding lights, Terence Stamp became the man every camera wanted. Yet behind the poise, he carried the boy from Stepney, the one who knew light could blind as easily as it could guide. Every close-up promised immortality. But even then, part of him was already looking for a way out. By the mid-60s, Terence Stamp had become the man who defined beauty itself. Directors wanted his stillness, photographers his angles, and the world his mystery. His presence was magnetic, controlled, enigmatic, unforgettable. He walked through the chaos of swinging London as if untouched by time. Yet the stillness that made him famous was beginning to turn into silence. The love story that defined that era was his The Actor and the Muse, Terence and Jean Shrimpton. Together, they were photographed like mythology, the perfect couple of a perfect decade. But perfection is heavy. Fame turned their love into theater, their intimacy into performance. The lights never dimmed, and in that endless exposure, something sacred began to fade. While the tabloids printed fairy tales, the truth was lonelier. Jean drifted toward independence, and Terence, once the calm center of attention, began to feel adrift in his own reflection. "I wasn't living," he said later. "I was being watched." The roles became fewer, not for lack of offers, but because he had begun to question the entire machinery of fame. He grew distant, reading philosophy, turning to meditation, searching for something deeper than applause. Directors misread it as detachment. Friends called it arrogance. But inside, he was wrestling with the oldest question of all. Who am I when the camera stops? In public, he was a masterpiece of composure. In private, he was cracking quietly, beautifully. Fame had built him a temple of glass, and every gaze made another fracture. He was no longer chasing light. He was learning how to live in the dark. It happened quietly, without drama, as if a man had simply exhaled and stepped out of the frame. After the mind of Mr. Soames in blue, the offers didn't stop, but something in him did. Terence Stamp, the icon every camera craved, chose absence over adoration. He didn't announce a retreat, he just disappeared. To those around him, it looked like madness. For Hollywood, it was a vanishing act no one could explain. But for Stamp, it was the first honest thing he'd done in years. He left the world that had made him a god and went east, not for a role, but for redemption. India became his refuge, a landscape where he could dissolve the image that fame had built around him. For a time, he had no agent, no home, no audience. He lived in monasteries, studied spiritual discipline, and embraced the silence he had once feared. There are stories of him walking barefoot through crowded streets, unnoticed, unguarded. He called it liberation. Others whispered of decline. Yet what looked like a fall was really a shedding, a slow burning away of everything artificial. Fame had promised him eternity but offered only mirrors. In India, he found something purer, impermanence. Still, the silence had its cost. Decades passed, his name faded from the headlines. The man once described as the most beautiful face in cinema became a rumor of his own myth. But if you looked closely in those rare interviews, those faraway glances, you could see it. Not defeat, but peace. He hadn't vanished. He had simply stopped performing for the world. When he returned, it felt like a ghost re-entering his own legend. The beauty was still there, but tempered now, sharper, quieter, filled with the weight of things unsaid. Hollywood, restless and forgetful, barely recognized him at first. But when Terence Stamp stepped into the role of General Zod in Superman 2, it was as if silence itself had found a voice. There he stood, cloaked in black, calm amid chaos, his eyes like polished glass. The performance was both terrifying and transcendent. Audiences saw a villain. Those who knew him saw something else, a man who had learned the power of restraint, the authority of stillness. Behind Zod's command was the echo of a pilgrim who had walked through loss and found meaning in control. After that, he never chased momentum again. He appeared in The Limey, Wall Street, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, each role touched by a sense of reflection rather than ambition. The old hunger for approval had vanished, replaced by something steadier, presence without performance. In his memoirs, Stamp wrote of loneliness not as tragedy but as revelation. He called fame a strange love affair with light, beautiful, but never faithful. The words felt like a confession from a man who had finally made peace with his shadow. There was no tragic ending, no scandal to explain. Just a man who had walked away from the noise and learned how to listen again. He had gone missing once, but this time he had returned on his own terms. He had nothing to prove. And that, perhaps, was the purest kind of victory. Time softens everything, even the brightest light. Yet somehow, Terence Stamp's glow never faded, it simply changed hue. The young man who once embodied perfection became a symbol of introspection, of what it means to turn away without bitterness. His legacy is not carved in scandal or excess, but in stillness, in the rare beauty of restraint. Today, when people watch The Collector, they still feel the chill of his quiet power. When they revisit The Limey, they sense the pain behind his calm, the decades of searching beneath every line he speaks. His performances became mirrors, not just of character, but of a soul who had lived both fame and disappearance. Younger actors study him not for technique, but for truth. Directors recall his presence the way he could hold a scene by simply existing within it. Fans speak of that face, once flawless, now lined with grace, as if time itself bowed in respect. In interviews, his words are measured, poetic. To disappear, he once said, is not to be lost, it's to return to yourself. And that is the paradox of his legend. The star who walked away is the one who never truly left. His silence became his legacy, and the world, at last, learned to listen. Some stars burn fast and vanish in flame. Others fade slowly into obscurity. But Terence Stamp chose a rarer path to leave while the light was still golden. His story isn't one of ruin or regret. It's a meditation on distance, on the quiet courage it takes to step out of the spotlight and still remain unforgettable. He was proof that fame and silence can coexist, that the truest strength may lie in knowing when to walk away. Beneath the legend of the man who disappeared is something far greater, the wisdom of someone who saw through the illusion of endless applause. His life became a reflection of the truth behind every performance. That light, no matter how bright, always casts a shadow. And in that shadow, he found peace. He had everything, yes, but in losing it, he found himself. He was the man who turned silence into a statement, the actor who vanished so the world could finally see what fame hides. What do you see when you look at Terence Stamp, the icon who disappeared, or the soul that survived the noise? Share your thoughts below. Which version of him stays with you, the legend on screen, or the wanderer who walked away from it? And remember,